Look up to the sky. Is it a bird? Is it a plane? No, it's something so utterly unhuman that it's making Russian soldiers surrender to Ukraine in droves. Whenever Ukraine sends this, it results in Putin's troops waving the white flag as they desperately try to avoid imminent death. Sinister and unfeeling, this is something that Ukraine unleashed time and time again over the winter, and it's going to become an even more important weapon than it already is in 2026. Have you guessed what we're talking about yet? It's Ukraine's drones, and they've been forcing Russia's soldiers to give up throughout the winter. Ukraine's defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov provides the details in a March 7th X-Post. This winter, more than 100 occupiers laid down their arms thanks to the work of unmanned units. Every captured soldier is an opportunity to bring our defenders home, Fedorov declared. We'll get to the second part of his statement in a moment. First, over 100 occupiers laying down their weapons when faced with drones is something that simply isn't supposed to be happening, but it is. And it's because Putin's forces know how terrifying these drones are. Ukraine's machines fly overhead constantly, watching and waiting for any glimpse of a soldier in the vast kill zones that Ukraine has created around the settlements that it's defending. These drones are responsible for between 70 and 80% of all casualties that occur on the front lines. So Russia's soldiers know what it means when a drone has them in its sights. They will be seconds away from death. The only way to escape is to surrender. And that's what we see time and time again in a video that Fedorov published alongside his X-Post to prove that what he's saying isn't just a load of hot air. We see Russian soldiers with their hands raised, some stranded out in the open knowing that they have nowhere else to go, others hidden away in a shelter only to discover that a drone has spotted them and is ready to unleash hell. The footage is interspersed with occasional examples of what happens to the soldiers who are foolish enough not to surrender to Ukraine's sinister flying machines. And it isn't pretty. The surrendering soldiers have likely seen far too many examples of what will happen to them. They know better than to risk their lives in fights with Ukraine's drones. And if you keep watching, you'll discover that these soldiers are still risking it all when they wave the white flag. But before we get to that, we said that these sorts of drone surrenders shouldn't be happening. At least, they've never really happened in any other war before, as traditional surrenders usually occur when a soldier or unit has been backed into an inescapable corner by a much larger force. In other words, surrenders rarely happen in one-on-one situations, at least before the Ukraine war. But that's what we're seeing now. Drones simply have to hover overhead, and Russian soldiers are raising their hands and following the commands that emanate from the drones to allow themselves to be taken prisoner by Ukraine. This is precisely what Ukraine wants, and the reason why comes down to the prisoner exchanges to which Fedorov alludes in his X-Post. It will be all too easy for Ukraine's drone operators to simply zero in on the Russian soldiers that they located on the battlefield. They've done it plenty of times before, and continue to do so to the tune of eliminating thousands of Putin's forces every single month. On March 5th alone, Pravda reported that Russia lost an estimated 900 soldiers during the previous 24 hours, which reinforces the fact that Ukraine's small metal monstrosities are the biggest dealers of death in the entire war. After all, remember we said 70 to 80% of casualties being caused by drones. This means that between 630 and 720 of the casualties Russia experienced in just 24 hours came at the hands, or should we say, bombs and kamikaze strikes, of Ukraine's drones. Bumping up the Russian casualty rate is never a bad thing for Ukraine. But now Ukraine is able to use the terrifying reputation that its drones have developed to get its hands on something even more valuable than yet another Russian name in the obituary column. By taking prisoners, Ukraine gives itself something to trade for the lives of soldiers that have been captured by Russia's forces. Right now, prisoner exchanges are really the only sort of semi-peaceful activity that occurs between Russia and Ukraine on the battlefield. So drones capturing over 100 Russian soldiers during the winter alone provides some much-needed bargaining power to get more Ukrainian soldiers home and potentially back onto the battlefield. In fact, we've seen one of these prisoner transfers occur recently. Just a day before Fedorov revealed what Ukraine's drones managed to achieve during the winter, Al Jazeera reported that Ukraine and Russia had completed a 2-day prisoner swap that saw each side receive 500 of its captured soldiers. Were any of the soldiers that Ukraine's drones caught part of this exchange? We don't know for sure, but it seems likely. And if they were, we see the ultimate irony that Ukraine's machines that are so scary to any Russian soldier who comes across them are the indirect saviors of Ukrainians who might have wasted away or been tortured to death as Russia's prisoners. But by now you might be wondering how all of this works. After all, we just told you that the traditional way for soldiers to surrender has nothing to do with drones. It couldn't have. Drones, although they have existed long before the war, have only really emerged as a viable all-purpose tool during Ukraine's defense of its territory against Putin's aggression. And it's in boosting that defense through innovation and new drone designs that Ukraine has been able to develop the capability to capture prisoners without one of its soldiers having to be present at the moment of capture. There are several examples of how this can be done. Artificial intelligence, or AI, plays a role in some cases. On January 27th, United 24 media reported that one of Ukraine's AI-powered ground robots had managed to capture a trio of soldiers during a combat operation. The robot in question was a Droid TW-7.62, which was built by Droid and being operated remotely by a Ukrainian soldier who is part of the country's 3rd Separate Assault Brigade. Without risk to our fighters, the mission was completed remotely. The exchange fund has been replenished. This is what modern warfare looks like. Robots on the front line, people safe, the brigade said when announcing the capture. The Droid TW-7.62 is a remotely operated unmanned ground vehicle built on the Pneumo platform. That's a pretty big incentive for a Russian soldier to surrender right there. Just imagine a big hunk of metal that you can't stop with small arms fire, bearing down on you with a machine gun that could shred you apart in seconds, and you can guess why arms would be raised in a heartbeat. It's here where the AI comes into play, as it's used by the drone to improve the accuracy and firing efficiency of the attached gun. Perhaps Russia's trio of surrendering soldiers had just seen Ukraine's ground drone destroy their comrades with unerring accuracy, and they decided they wanted no part of that fight. Regardless, it seems that the drone was used to lead the surrendering soldiers to Ukraine's position, where they were officially taken captive. And that seems to be the crux of how this all works. A drone can't apply zip ties or take a soldier into custody itself, but what it can do is present such a massive threat that a soldier is convinced to surrender. Then, after the soldier disarms himself under the threat of the drone that is staring them in the face, they are led to where Ukraine wants them to be, so they're taken captive. That seems to have been what happened during an incident upon which United 24 media reported on February 17th. In that instance, a pair of Russian soldiers initially surrendered to one of Ukraine's drones before convincing 3 more of their comrades to do the same thing. And how did Ukraine make it happen? United 24 media says that the drone in question was equipped with a loudspeaker through which Ukraine blared warnings about what was going to happen to any Russian soldiers found in the North Slobozansky direction that it was patrolling. Russian soldiers, we know where you are hiding. We are giving you one last chance. In 1 hour, your shelter will be completely destroyed. If you surrender, you will live and return to your families. All your groups that moved with you yesterday have already been destroyed and are lying in the fields, came the message from the loudspeaker. This is propaganda turned into real power. And the worst of it for Putin's soldiers is that they know that these warnings are 100% accurate. They've seen comrades die in droves to Ukraine's drones, so an unhuman weapon delivering such a pointed warning is something to be taken seriously. In this case, 5 Russian soldiers got the message. Then they followed the drone to a safe place where they could surrender, at least most of them did. United 24 media reports that other Russian soldiers fired on one of those trying to surrender, which offers a little hint about something we mentioned earlier in terms of Putin's troops taking their lives into their own hands when they wave a white flag. It's a damned if you do and destroyed by a drone if you don't situation, and we're about to dig a little deeper into it. But before we get to that, there's plenty more where this came from. If you're getting value from the military show, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our videos. So how are Russian soldiers taking their lives into their own hands when they surrender to Ukraine's drones? After all, it seems like the worst of their experience should be over, right? They haven't been blown up by a drone, and they're on their way to the relative safety of a Ukrainian prison to wait it out until they're traded back to Russia. If only it were that simple. To say that Putin takes a dim view of Russia's surrendering soldiers would be an understatement. Russia's leader is a man who believes that everybody he sends to the front lines should be willing to fight until the very end for his cause, and if they find themselves in an unwinnable situation, they should kill themselves before they're captured. This isn't hyperbole. In December 2024, UKR Inform reported that Russian soldiers were being given instructions by their commanders on how to commit suicide if they were at risk of being captured or surrendering, which just shows you how little Putin values the soldiers that he's sending to Ukraine. If a Russian soldier can't go through with eliminating themselves and instead surrenders to Ukraine, then any number of horrific fates might await them. The best of these fates is a lengthy prison sentence forced upon them by the Kremlin. To Putin, voluntary surrender, like what we saw in Fedorov's video, is a crime worthy of extreme punishment. We learned that on April 15, 2025, which is when the Moscow Times reported on Russia issuing a first official prison sentence to a soldier who had voluntarily surrendered to Ukraine. That soldier, named Roman Ivanishin, was a junior sergeant who was stripped of his rank and told that he would have to serve a 15-year sentence for the crime of not allowing himself to die in Ukraine for Putin's power fantasy. Now, take a guess at how long the sentence for murder is in Russia. If you guessed up to 15 years, you're a winner. Under Article 105 of Russia's Criminal Code, murder with no aggravating circumstances is punished with a sentence of between 6 and 15 years. There are larger sentences for murder with aggravating circumstances, up to and including the death sentence. But that doesn't change the fact that Ivanishin received a sentence reserved for some of the absolute worst in Russian society, all for the crime of attempting to surrender to Ukraine. But hey, he might be able to get out of his jail time. All he has to do is become one of the 180,000 plus convicts that Russia has recruited for its military, which we suppose will give him another chance to surrender. The Kremlin probably won't make the same offer to Ivanishin that it makes to many of its other criminals, that is, unless it wants to manufacture a circumstance where the soldier faces an even worse fate than the one he's been given. After all, you could argue that Ivanishin is one of the lucky ones. He got imprisoned for trying to surrender to Ukraine. Other Russian soldiers get killed. We've seen this several times during the course of the war. Back in July, Militani reported on one such incident, which saw one Russian soldier shoot another as the second soldier attempted to surrender to Ukraine. One of Ukraine's drones observed the entire incident from overhead, perhaps having been used by Ukraine to convince the shot soldier to give himself up. Footage of the incident exists, though much of it is too graphic to share in this video. But what you see if you watch the video is the surrendering soldier being shot once from a distance, leading to him crumpling to the ground. A few seconds later, the shooter follows up by walking right up to the soldier and shooting him in the head. It's a terrible fate, but it's one that Russia seems to actively encourage in a military where every soldier exists for no other reason than to throw themselves at Ukraine's defenses. If the soldier won't even do that, they're as good as dead to Putin anyway. What difference does it make to Russia's callous leader if that soldier is shot by Ukraine or one of his own comrades? At least the dead soldier won't give Ukraine something that it can trade for one of its own captured soldiers. Another incident was captured on video on October 2025. Reported on by TVP World this time, Russia's forces used one of its own drones to kill a man who was attempting to either desert or surrender to Ukraine. The soldier had barely even started the process of giving himself up. Ukraine's ground forces said that one of their reconnaissance drones had seen the soldier begin to lay down his arms, likely as preparation to surrender to Ukraine. Almost as soon as the weapon hits the ground, an explosive device dropped by a Russian drone lands next to him. Boom! The explosion kills the surrendering soldier in an instant. Again, the footage is too graphic to share in this video, but as the ground forces said in its statement, this is yet another evidence that the enemy does not value the lives of even its own soldiers. We have one more example. On February 10th, United 24 media reported that Russia's forces are still attacking their own soldiers, especially when those soldiers are attempting to give themselves up to Ukraine's drones. The outlet reports on a pair of Putin's soldiers who had surrendered to Ukrainian drones flown by the 24th Separate Mechanized Brigade in the Chaziv Yar region. As the drones guided the Russian soldiers to a location where they could surrender, a Russian FPV drone attacked, killing both. This is the reality that a Russian soldier faces in Putin's army, and we've seen it too many times to count. But what this tells us is that conditions that Putin is forcing his soldiers to endure are so horrific that they are still willing to risk it all when one of Ukraine's drones gives them the opportunity. These contraptions, which have delivered so much death to Putin's men, are still being seen as potential saviors, if not from other Ukrainian drones, then from the surrendering soldiers' comrades. Even with all of this risk, Russia's soldiers still hold their hands up and follow Ukraine's drones. Fedorov said it happened over 100 times during the past winter alone, and in total, Russia's soldiers are surrendering in record numbers, even with the threats of prison and death by the hands of their own comrades looming over them. On December 31st, United 24 media reported that over 10,000 of Russia's soldiers have been taken prisoner by Ukraine since Putin launched his invasion. The number will be even higher now after the winter, and though this seems like a small number, given that Russia is believed to have some 700,000 soldiers in Ukraine, keep in mind what we've just told you. These are 10,000 soldiers who will eventually be sent back to Russia. They know that prison might await. So might the prospect of being sent back to the front, where they might be shot by their commanders if they try to surrender again. Heck, they might even be shot as soon as they arrive as a form of delayed punishment for what they did. Many now look at Ukraine's drones as a safe way out of the war that Putin pushed them into. It's a lot safer than sticking with inept commanders who point rifles at their heads if the soldiers so much as breathe a word that questions their orders. What Ukraine has found here is a way to encourage non-contact surrenders. It keeps its own soldiers safe while giving Russians a way to give up, all by using the very drones that have killed Putin's forces in droves. And in a kind of strange, twisted bonus for Ukraine, any Russian who fails to surrender because their own forces kill them still amounts to a win for Ukraine. That's one more soldier eliminated from the battlefield. As for the drones, they simply move on to the next target. It's no real surprise that so many of Russia's soldiers are now so willing to take their chances with a Ukrainian drone ahead of staying in the field. The numbers are in, and Russia is experiencing the largest troop losses in modern history. If you want to find out why so many surrendering soldiers are trying to avoid becoming part of Putin's humiliating statistics, check out our video, which showcases just how poorly Russia's military is doing. And if you enjoyed this video, remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more coverage of the latest developments in the Ukraine war. And thank you, as always, for watching.